This is John Weltman, the person I owe my own family, existence to, and he's going to talk about some of the aspects, about the general aspects of surrogacy in the United States.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. I started in the process of surrogacy about 16 years ago. At the time, the only type of surrogacy that was available to gay men, and we were probably about the fifth in the world that did this, was traditional surrogacy, where you artificially inseminated a woman who carried her own child to term and then relinquished it to you in an adoption procedure. Over the course of the past dozen years that I've had this agency, we have moved from traditional surrogacy to much more of what we're going to discuss today, which we call egg donor surrogacy, where there is both a gestational carrier and an egg donor. I have been with my husband now for 25 years. We met when we were very, very young. And we have
5 years old.
Thank you. -3. When we our children, my oldest was just bar mitzvah 2 weeks ago, and my youngest will be next October, so it's a very exciting time in our lives. We now actually work in 25 different countries, but due to Gil and Dror, we are now finding Israel is number 1 or number 2 in terms of the number of countries, in terms of the other countries that we work with the most. And we're very excited about that, and I'm delighted to see the turnout today. It seems to me that there's a great deal of interest here, and one of the things that we have discovered as we've begun to focus more on Israel is that the law is such here that it will actually be perhaps easier than any other country in terms of accomplishing things for you legally, which is very, very exciting. And I will leave that to the two ladies to explain to you. What we do at Circle Surrogacy is we are a full service agency. We do everything. And sometimes that means we turn you over to the right people to do it for you, but we orchestrate it. To sort of take one quick step back, what we do most of, almost exclusively now for gay men, is what I call egg donor surrogacy. And that involves one woman who is carrying a child to term that is not her own, that was created using the sperm of one, or possibly both of you, we'll talk about that in a moment, and the egg of another woman. So what you do is you come to us and you select a donor, and we help you find that person, an egg donor. Sometimes that can be even your sister, as in Ron's case with his partner. We have other people who have chosen a friend, that is fine. But most people come to us and ask us to find them a donor. And in most instances, and we can talk at length about this later, most people choose to know their donor, so that if later in life they want to introduce their children, if they want to get medical information from her, that's something that's available to them, but that's not necessary. That is completely up to you. But it's nice to be able to find out, is she as bright as she sounds on paper? Is she as pretty as she appears on paper? And if my children someday want to meet her, as long as I have complete security that she cannot step into my life, can I perhaps introduce you? And we make that happen if that's something you want. We also find gestational carriers for you. And you will hear from our best. There's nothing better than Manette. She is extraordinary. But there are some who come very close. And we try very hard to reach the goddess, but we don't always get there. I would have to say that my own personal carrier would actually match, but she wasn't gotten through my program. I found her before I started the program. The criteria for these women are incredibly hard. Dr. Doyle will talk to you about some of the criteria that the egg donors go through in terms of the genetic testing that we have to have and the health of these women. But for the carriers, criteria are very much focused on them having been mothers before, having no complications with their pregnancy, coming from a state in the United States where surrogacy is legal, having the support of their husbands and family, and then matching with you on your opinions with regard to important things such as abortion, selective reduction, and other things which we will talk about. So in fact, in our experience over the past dozen years, 1 out of 8 women will make a donor in our program, and it will be 1 out of 30 women who will be a carrier. And sometimes, even if they were a carrier once for us, things can happen with the pregnancy in which they're carrying, in which case we either have to limit their ability to carry in the future or not have them carry again, because, again, complications are very important to us. I think that the reason that the United States has gone so much more to egg donor surrogacy instead of traditional surrogacy is 2 things. One is choice, and the other one is the law. From a choice perspective, it's not always the case that the 2 women are going to line up into one person who would be the right person to both carry your child and be the donor for you. It may be things that you're looking for that the carrier won't have, such as, is she Jewish? Or is she, have a graduate degree? Or is she a young woman between the ages of 21 and 28, and so her eggs are of the top quality? In the case of an egg donor, she may not have qualities that you need in a carrier, like having had a child before, or 2 or 3 for that matter, having had uncomplicated pregnancies before, being from a state where surrogacy is legal, whereas in all but 1 state, egg donation is legal. So these things are much better separated out and allow you a lot more choices. In addition, legally speaking, while in the United States there have been about 14 printed decisions on traditional surrogacy, all of which gave some rights to the traditional surrogate because she is the genetic mother of the child. Those rights have largely been very limited to visitation. It's not something an Israeli couple wants to set up with someone in the United States. And it's really of about 7,000 births, so it's 0.2%, which is why we don't think it's much of a risk, and we have continued to do it. The truth is that comparatively speaking, it's 2 cases in gestational surrogacy where the battle has been drawn. There have been close to 15,000 births, and I don't know what percentage that is, but it's tiny, and neither woman got any rights to the child. So that the law in the United States now is literally 100%. There has never been a case where a gestational carrier has ever gotten any rights to a child. I think in terms of what we potentially bring to an Israeli gay couple looking to do this is the very careful orchestration for you so that you can sit here in Israel and come as little as you want to the United States, potentially even, if I weren't here today, not meeting me, and have a baby. And that means that I've not just got to introduce you to the social workers in my program who screen the surrogates and donors for you, that I also have to introduce you to me and my associates who are going to do the legal work for you. But I also have to introduce you to lawyers outside my office who will represent the carriers and donors and will be negotiating with them. I have to introduce you to social workers outside the office who will be supporting the carrier throughout the process. I have to introduce you to Michael Doyle, or whomever you might choose, but we strongly suggest Michael Doyle, because of his extraordinary comfort with working with gay couples, the capacity his office has to communicate on a daily and sometimes multi-time-a-day basis with our office to make sure that we know what's going on in your lives, you know what's going on in your lives, your carrier and your donor, everybody who needs to be there is there at the same time, and then coordinate with travel agencies to get you all in the same place at the same time, and then make sure that the obstetrician she's working with is qualified, or God forbid, if it's a high-risk pregnancy, we get you a high-risk OB that's supervising the pregnancy, and make sure that the hospital is set up, and that if it's not in Massachusetts or California, you have a lawyer in the state where the baby's going to be done. That's a lot of coordination, and it sounds complicated, but in fact I hope, and you can talk to some of the people here who are already in my program, that we make that doable for you. Because ultimately, all this event is coming to one moment in time, hopefully, where you are bringing the women to a place, you guys to a place where the eggs are fertilized, implanted into the embryos, and the pregnancy begins, and then you come back and take your baby, and we try to make it as simple as possible. There's no way that this process is simple. It still involves a pregnancy, it still involves getting pregnant, it still involves choosing among people what makes you feel best, but we try to listen to you. We'll ask you to give us criteria you're looking for in a donor and actually rate it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 as to what's most important to you. We'll give you examples of other donors so you can say, is education more important to me than height or eye color or Judaism or whatever might be the case? And what's most important is going to be, we're going to try to find first before the things that are maybe 9 and 10 on the list. It's very much involves you. There are lots of things that you need to know, but we try to make it as easy as possible for you. And when we do a match, sometimes the matches don't happen in order. I know there are people here today who were upset a week ago because they knew that people had been matched before them, who are now matched, thank goodness. But I think it's partly because we know that the law matters and how that law is going to jive with Israel's law, that what you want, whether you want twins or one child is mattered, whether you're looking for someone who has insurance or is willing to pay for insurance matters. All those things are a matching process that we do for you. And the same thing applies to the donor, but even to a greater degree in some ways, because then it's very specific. People have very much concern sometimes about eye color, hair color, height, weight, and that's something which we try to do as well. In general, when we're doing the match, we will match you first with a donor, because that is probably the most important piece of this. It's the genetic mother of your child. We want to talk to you about your situation. Some people come to us, most, if they're a gay couple as opposed to a single, and they will say, we both want to be fathers at the same time with the same donor. That is possible. It doesn't always work, but it is possible. Michael can describe to you the procedure, but essentially, the egg donor is likely to produce something like 20 eggs. They're placed into 2 petri dishes, divided into 2 sets of 10. The gentlemen each fertilize 1 petri dish, so 8 or 10 may erupt, and then 1 of each is implanted into the uterus of the carrier and carried to term. It doesn't always work that way. You can get 2 of one of the other. You can get 1 only. You can get none. But that is a goal that many have. Some people who come as a single will say to us, "I only want to have 1 child," and then we talk about single embryo transfer versus 2 embryo transfer. What do you want to do? So all these things are part of the process. You need to be involved in and make decisions wherever you are, but we can communicate by email, by telephone. You're coming to our offices or Michael's office is something which happens after we have all the information you need. Once you're matched, the procedure from sort of starting time of your signing up to baby averages about 18 months. And the way that breaks down is it usually takes about 1 to 3 months to match you with a carrier, about another 1 to 3, with a donor, about another 1 to 3 months to match you with a carrier. It then takes about a month to have the carrier and donor screened, 2 months to coordinate their cycle so that this lengthy procedure that Mike will talk to you about can happen, and then 9 months to baby. We have had babies as early as 8.5 months, only for couples who already had frozen embryos, and a donor who is ready to go, and people, very few, thank God, who take it as long as 3 years. Most people come in the 1 to 2 year basis. We had a period of time where we were a bit overwhelmed, and I think we were slowing that process down. We're actually picking back up again, partly because we have intentionally held off couples from joining us for a couple of months, and I have intentionally changed my focus and been marketing much more towards the surrogates, and we're increasing those numbers dramatically, which we're working very hard to do. Our goal is to get back to where we were about a year ago, before some of the hoopla that's happening sort of all over the country and the world to us, where we were matching between 1 and 3 months to couples. But at this moment, we're saying likely 6 months is the time frame for both the donor and the carrier combined. In terms of costs, this is a $100,000 baby. There is no way out of it. You probably can do it in some other country. We can talk about that. I have enormous concerns about some of the other countries where it can be done. But in the United States, anyone who tells you that this can be done for less than $80,000 is lying to you. And anyone who tells you that it's going to cost you $200,000 is overcharging you. It is probably something in the 80 to 120 range, but I think that number of 100 has to be a likely one. The way it breaks down in general is the combination of agency and legal fees is about $25,000. The carrier is about $25,000. The donor is $5,000 to $10,000. And the IVF process with all of the different doctor bills involved is probably another $35,000. There needs to be flexibility in there. There may need to be a second transfer. There's going to be some travel involved. There may be some contingencies if you have twins. But if you have twins, that's it. There's your family. You don't have to do it again. If you don't have twins, the cost a second go round will be substantially less. Our hope is about half the price. The reason being that you should be able to do a frozen embryo transfer, which is an infinitely less expensive IVF procedure, around $5,000 to $8,000. We substantially reduce our fees. There's no charge for the donor. And so all you're really spending is about $25 for the carrier, about $5 for the IVF process, about $10 to $15 for legal and agency work, and that should be the sort of range plus travel. That's people who are thinking, I might like to have more than one child. It's why a lot of people come to us and say, twins may be hell, but I don't want to get hit with this a second go round. In terms of the way we work things out financially, we try very hard to prove ourselves to you before you pay too much to us. In the course of 12 years, we have never not been able to match a couple or single with a carrier. That's a double negative, so I'll repeat myself. We have always been able to match every couple and every single who came to us with a carrier. It has never been a problem. What occasionally has happened, and I'd say 3 times in 12 years, is that someone is very picky about the donor they want. They want a brown, curly-haired, 5'7" Jewish Harvard graduate who went to Columbia for her PhD. Honest to God, I found it. That is not the one I missed. Or the Stanford blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 5'8" or taller graduate who had already been an egg donor before. I found that one too. But nevertheless, some people have come along and they've been pickier than that. And we weren't able to find it. We will tell you after 6 months of our looking, if we can't find it, you go somewhere else. Or, if you've already found it somewhere else, it's your friend, it's your agency, that's fine. You don't have to sign up with us for the egg donation piece of this. We try to be flexible. This is meant to be what you want. We're going to ask a couple or single who comes to us for egg donor surrogacy for everything to pay us initially $22,000. And there is not another penny that is paid to us until everything you think we're doing is done. And that means we have found you a carrier that is completely subjectively to your liking. We have found you a donor that is completely subjectively to your liking, and you've approved them both. Hopefully you've met them both, but that's up to you. You've certainly talked to at least the carrier. You have had them both completely psychologically reviewed, not just by our social workers, but by our outside psychologists who do psychiatric testing on them. Other thing that we do is to have them completely medically approved, and Michael will talk to you about medical approval and what's involved in that, but it involves a whole series of genetic tests on the egg donor. It involves even uterine soundings on women who may have had a baby 6 months ago to make sure her uterus is just as good as it ever was, or people are already leaving. And so The medical tests have all been done. We've actually done all the legal work so that you have a lawyer, she has a lawyer, and you guys have reached agreement on price, you've reached agreement on amniocentesis and artificial and abortion and selective reduction in every single term, and you're happy and she's happy, and the doctor is knocking at my door saying, I'm ready to start medications now, because everything's in place. And at that point in time, there's about $40,000 that will then come into our hands. It does not go into literally our hands. It goes into the trust fund at my law firm. Our law firm is housed with our surrogacy agency in the same building, in the same office space for a reason. It is to protect you. Every penny you pay goes into a trust fund account until either we earn it or the carrier gets paid it. It is called an IOLTA account, so literally it's a client funds account that cannot be accessed unless there's either an agreement with us or an agreement with her allowing us to access it. I can be disbarred and my law firm can lose its license if we take a penny wrongly. In addition, she, however, has the right to be paid if the contract says it and she hasn't breached. So it's out of your hand and it protects her as well. If the law firm goes belly up, if the agency goes belly up, it makes no difference. The funds are protected. That will happen to you in no other business. And the reason the agency is attached to the law firm is we want you to have that security with your funds. The other remaining funds will be paid to a variety of doctors' offices depending upon how you work. Assuming even you work with Michael Doyle and Connecticut Fertility, still only a portion of that would be paid to them for the IVF procedure. If your women are not living in Connecticut, they will probably do their own screenings and monitoring local to them. You now, as a day and a half ago, Michael miraculously made it possible to ship blood products and urine to the United States, so you don't necessarily have to come over for that, although we recommend that you consider coming over to at least meet your carrier and donor, but it will make it less expensive for some of the procedures that will happen. Those will be paid either directly to them, or if they're paid through us, it will solely be so we can keep track of the funds and make sure we know what's being paid. I think that is the gist of what Ron wanted me to start with, but I think I would just say, when I'm going to turn it to Michael, but I think it's important for you to hold on to your questions, and then I'll answer some at the end, because I'm sure there will be